Hey fellow tea drinkers, I'm so excited to talk to you about all things government and all things life. Stay tuned for tonight's episode. The countdown to the 2020 general election has officially begun. There are 16 months until we vote for our next president of the United States, whether that would be Donald Trump or one out of the 20 Democratic candidates that are available. That is still to be seen. Tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about what went down on the Democratic debate night 1 and night 2. Before I get into what went down on night 1 of the debate, I think it's important to talk about who was actually there. So we're going to begin with Bill de Blasio, who is the mayor of New York City. He has campaigned on his administration's work in New York City, including the implementation of a universal pre-kindergarten program, which is something that we've tried in the state of Indiana and some legislators are still working on. And he's the most recent candidate to enter into the race. Next, we have Tim Ryan, who is a congressman from Ohio. He says he can win the Midwestern states by appealing to the working class Trump voters. He challenged Nancy Pelosi for the position of House Minority Leader after the 2016 election, and he has authored books on sustainable food systems and on mindfulness. After that, we have former Housing Secretary Julian Castro. He has emphasized immigration, saying those of us in Texas know about the border. He was San Antonio's youngest city council member, the youngest mayor of a top U.S. city, San Antonio, and the youngest member of President Obama's cabinet. He and his twin brother Joaquin, now a representative in Congress, were so competitive that they once played tennis for 8 hours straight in 100-degree heat. He would be the first Latino president. Next, we had Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker. Cory is a former mayor of Newark. He has campaigned on a message of unity and optimism. When presenting his tax credit plan for renters, he noted that he is the only senator who goes home to a low-income inner-city community. After that, we have Elizabeth Warren, who is the senator from Massachusetts. She has released more policy proposals than any other candidate, including an ultra-millionaire tax on assets above $50 million. She was a Harvard law professor focused on commercial law and bankruptcy before becoming a U.S. Senator in 2013. After that, we have former Congressman from Texas, Beto O'Rourke. He has pointed to low crime rates in his hometown El Paso as evidence that President Trump's border wall is not necessary, saying, "We are not safe because of walls, but in spite of walls." He drew national attention when he nearly beat Ted Cruz in a 2018 race for the U.S. Senate in Texas. Then we have Amy Klobuchar, who's a senator from Minnesota. She has emphasized her Midwestern background and taken moderate tack on issues like healthcare, student debt, and marijuana legislation, which makes her someone to focus on because there is a lot of divide across the Democratic Party. She co-sponsored more bills that passed the majority Republican Senate than any other senator since President Trump took office. After her, we have Tulsi Gabbard. She is a congresswoman from Hawaii. The Iraq War veteran has focused her campaign on her opposition to U.S. involvement in what she calls regime change wars. She resigned from her vice chair position on the Democratic National Committee to back Bernie Sanders in 2016. After, we have Jay Inslee, who is the governor of Washington. He has centered his campaign on proposals to address climate change and promote jobs in renewable energy. As governor, he ordered a cap on carbon emissions and established a Clean Energy Fund. Last but not least, we have John Delaney, who is a former congressman from Maryland. He says he would prioritize existing bipartisan legislation in areas like criminal justice, immigration, and healthcare in the first 100 days of his administration. He became the first Democrat to declare his candidacy in July 2017 and has appeared at more than twice the number of events in Iowa as any other candidate. The first week of debates was very policy focused, meaning that there were a lot of issues that are very important to the American people, whether that be healthcare coverage, the economy, which includes job creation, or maintenance, really. And that also included thoughts on abortion, border control, guns. Those are topics that are very controversial, but are really what keeps the American people interested and on people who they want to vote for. Based on the Twitter reaction and social media reaction in general that I've gathered, people were very excited about seeing what Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, and Beto O'Rourke had to say in regards to these foreign policy and domestic policy decisions. I find it really interesting that those were the three people that had the most speaking time. However, Julian Castro, who was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under the Obama administration, really shone on the first night when he talked about border development and he talked about what we should be doing as a country to really be engaged. Although he had the shortest amount of time out of the fellow three that I mentioned before, he really took the time to connect with the people. In regards to border development, he talked about the tragic case of the immigrant family that drowned. There was a 2-year-old girl that drowned in right outside of the border in Texas. And that's really sad, but you connected with people because that's something that could really affect anyone. It doesn't even have to be a border, but when you're trying to cross into a country and seek a better life, you never want to see the loss of life. So he really took that night, and a lot of people were really impressed when he kept pushing Representative O'Rourke on his views on immigration. Because there has been a lot of back and forth and a lot of fence crossing, as people like to say, right, in regards to politics, and that's why people are disinterested, because one moment candidates would say one thing to appeal to certain people, and then the other they do another thing or say something that appeals to a completely different base. So it's really interesting to see, not only from the moderators really asking them to clarify their statements, but from other candidates, because at the end of the day, I believe that the Democratic Party is trying to find the best candidate for them. The next topic that took a lot of time, but really was when the debate really got started and got interesting, was health insurance. The first question said, who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan, which is something that has been going around the Democratic ranks for a long time, because they see countries like Canada and Sweden and France that have these programs that tend to work. However, taxes are higher in order to make them run. Elizabeth Warren and Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, said that they would abolish private health insurance. However, Beto O'Rourke, Amy Klobuchar, and John Delaney said that choice is important in the matter. The topic that I was very interested in hearing was on abortion. As you all know, there have been a lot of bills across the country called heartbeat bills, in a sense, in which they target women who have abortions. And this is in response to Roe v. Wade. It is nothing new. However, every time there's a presidential election, each candidate makes it a point to either be for Roe v. Wade or to be against it. Most commonly, the Democratic nominees are for Roe v. Wade. So it's really interesting to see that there's a wide range as to when people will be constitutionally covered. So Elizabeth Warren said that there should be no limits on abortion. And I'm going to quote from her directly. She would make certain that every woman has access to the full range of reproductive health care services. That would include birth control, abortions, everything. However, Jay Inslee said that private insurers should be barred from refusing to cover abortions. So that's really interesting. And these are comments that are coming in response, directly in response to bills that have passed in Alabama. Indiana has its own version of that bill as well. I was expecting there to be a lot more debate on gun control. That has been one of the things that the Democratic Party has prided themselves on, is to talk about background checks and having a way that is safe for people. Cory Booker honestly was the only one that called for registration. Everyone else just mentioned background checks and limits on assault weapons. At the end of the night, we got to the part that doesn't interest a lot of people, but is also very important, and that's the topic on defense and foreign policy. Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, and Tulsi Gabbard, who was in the military, said that they would try to negotiate tougher restrictions in a revised nuclear deal with Iran. And they also talked about on how they would take out troops from the Middle East. However, Tim Ryan, who has been in government for a long time, said that he would stand up for troops to be deployed. And Gabbard, who was again in the military, said that troops in Afghanistan was futile. So it's really interesting to see the different sides, because there are some people that still believe that we should be in the Middle East and making our presence known, and there are others that say that it is not our place, and that it has honestly harmed us more than it has helped us. The first night of debates ended with what many consider the most important question: what is the greatest threat to the U.S.? The 2020 Democratic presidential hopefuls gave a wide range of answers. China was mentioned by Amy Klobuchar, Castro, Ryan, and Delaney. Climate change was mentioned by Warren, Booker, and O'Rourke. Inslee, who made climate change the linchpin of his campaign, pointed to our current president, Trump. Gabbard and Delaney said it was nuclear war. Klobuchar mentioned Iran, and de Blasio said Russia because it was trying to undermine our democracy. Now that I finished recapping what went down on night one of the Democratic debates, I want to know, did you watch? What were your thoughts? And are you excited about the 2020 election?